In this video, I'm going to talk about small talk, why it's important and how you can do it well. Hi everybody, I'm Bruce Lambert from How Communication Works. This is a channel where I teach you about communication skills so you can improve your relationships, succeed at work, and be more confident. All right, let's get into it. The worst thing about small talk is the name. Small talk suggests that it's unimportant and we can do without it maybe, but nothing could be further from the truth. So one of the things I want to do, one of my primary goals in this talk, is to convince you that small talk is important. It just has a bad name. So what is small talk? Low stakes, routine conversation used to establish social rapport. That's the important thing. Used to establish social rapport. It's low stakes, meaning that in any given encounter, making small talk well or poorly isn't going to mean much. But over the long run, if you can't make small talk, it's going to be very difficult for you to make friends, do well in interviews, and succeed in your career or date. All these things require small talk because small talk is the entree, the beginning, the entry into deeper conversations. Small talk prioritizes connection over content. There isn't a lot of informational content in small talk, and so that's why we tend to think it's not important. But what it lacks in information, it makes up for in relational meaning, in establishing the safety of ongoing interaction with a person. And the examples are obvious. Hey, how's it going? Crazy weather. This is, typical small talk. And by the way, if you like my style of teaching, I'm developing a listening course, and in the description and in the pinned comment and a card at the end of the video, there's a link to that where you can get on the waiting list and get a free 10-page PDF about my new listening course. I do hope you'll check it out. It's a great way of supporting the channel and of learning about listening. Small talk is in a category of communication that has a strange name theoretically. It's called phatic communication, P-H-A-T-I-C, phatic. This is language that performs a social function but doesn't involve a lot of information transfer, meaning that there just isn't a lot of content in terms of information in small talk. Rather, it's about the social meaning and the relational meaning of the talk. So they could be trivial words, often scripted, routinized, ritualized words like, hey, how are you? Fine, fine, how are you? These things that we say over and over again, and because they don't contain that much novel information, we mistakenly think they're not important for our relationships, but they are. And of course, greetings, farewells, small acknowledgments, these are classic examples of small talk. It's amazing how much of our talk consists of small talk. And I have a variety of citations here of people who have studied normally recordings of naturally occurring talk, and then they go back and tally up how much of it is small talk. And it varies somewhere between 20 to 30% of service encounters, 23% of everyday talk in a corpus or a collection of American conversation, 30 to 40% of office talk is this relationship building rather than task-focused talk. 65% of speaking time, according to the friendship expert Robin Dunbar, involves some kind of small talk or social talk. So that's a broader category than just small talk. And there could be cultural differences where pre-meeting talk in Japan might involve as much as 50% small talk, whereas in the United States it might be 25%. But still, no matter what, we're talking about a quarter to a third of all talk is small talk. If it were really genuinely unimportant to social relationships, would it account for 20% or 30% of all the things we say? It must be important, and it is. It establishes the safety of relationships and establishes rapport. It demonstrates to one another that we can follow the norms of social interaction. Just doesn't carry a lot of informational content, carries relational content. It affirms our presence. I'm present, you're present. So we make small talk when we become co-present in an encounter, either physically or digitally, and it establishes social safety. That is, these ritualized forms of deference and demeanor, these ways of acknowledging one another, establish that I understand the norms of human communication and I will give to you the dignity that you deserve, and I expect that if you engage in small talk appropriately, then you will grant me the dignity that I deserve as a human being. And this establishes that it's safe to engage in further communication and maybe in deeper communication as well. It avoids uncomfortable silences. And even so-called talking about nothing establishes this goodwill that allows us to proceed to deeper, more important, and more contentful topics. I love this example from Robin Dunbar. He says that small talk is the human version of primate grooming. And if you don't know what primate grooming is, that's where primates like chimpanzees pick the ticks and bugs out of each other's hair. And I've always thought it was so intimate the way they did that. And I love this analogy between small talk and grooming. So next time you're engaged in small talk, you can think in the back of your mind, oh, I'm doing this intimate grooming of my friend. I'm picking the ticks out of their hair. And it supports trust and the building of these larger alliances in social groups and bonding. All of these things are really important, much more important than the word or the phrase small talk would suggest. And here's a picture of two chimpanzees engaged in this grooming ritual where one is gently and intimately combing through the hair of the other, picking out the ticks and bugs. So one of the reasons we think small talk is not important is because it's scripted, it's routinized. It's the same thing we say over and over again when we encounter someone. There's this script. Hey, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? How was your weekend? Oh, mine was fine. How was yours? How are the kids? Good. The wife? Good. How about you? So because it's routinized and scripted like this, we think it's meaningless. But there are other rituals too. So if you're a Catholic, for example, if you go to church every Sunday, you go up and you take the communion and it's ritualized. It's done the same way every time. It doesn't mean it's meaningless. In fact, rituals, things that are done sort of symbolically in the same way every time, are more meaningful than other forms of interaction or behavior. So the fact that it's routinized and ritualized isn't a sign of its lack of importance. Rather, it's a sign of its core significance to social interaction. We hear small talk in hallways and elevators and coffee shops before and after meetings or classes. These are the kind of classic domains. Because so much of our interaction takes place in the digital realm now, it's not surprising that there have grown up digital equivalents of small talk. That is, ritualized ways of interacting in digital spaces that serve the same function. That is, to establish rapport, to establish familiarity with the norms of a given interaction, to recognize the presence of another person, to remind us of our humanity and our connection and our bonding and so on. So things like, texting with emojis and likes, sharing memes, all these things maintain our social presence to one another in a digital space where we're not physically co-present. And they're virtual equivalents of a nod, a smile, a handshake, a wave, etc. Again, I've said before, it establishes rapport and creates a positive social tone so that we can move to deeper, more intimate topics. But if we can't establish that safety at first, people are not willing to move to deeper topics. So small talk itself doesn't have much content. It's ritualized, routinized, and so on, but it paves the way to deeper, more intimate, more meaningful conversations. And that's why it's so important. It also signals trust and builds trust. And what does it signal? It signals that I'm familiar with the social norms of this culture and I'm able to obey them. And especially small talk norms, they signal our ability to maintain our own dignity. So I am a person with dignity who deserves to be treated with respect. And by treating other people in a certain way, we signal that we acknowledge your dignity as a person and I will treat you with respect in accordance with all the norms that bind us in this particular cultural situation. It also signals openness and friendliness and civility. All of this is like social safety. I am a normal person, someone who is safe to interact with. What's the psychology of this? Small talk makes us feel seen. And when we're acknowledged, when someone just waves at us as we pass by, it acknowledges we're not invisible. We are a person. We exist. And this is an important affirmation. And if you don't think it's important, imagine how you feel. Like sometimes you have that experience when you walk down a hallway or you walk down the street or you pass by someone's office and you wave and smile and they don't wave or smile or even look up. We feel invisible. We feel like we don't matter. We feel like we don't count. And so, as with so many social norms, it's when they're broken that we realize they're important. So for example, there's a social norm that in an elevator, we face front. And you think, well, that's no big deal. You may not have even ever thought about that. But try going into an elevator and facing the rear, and you'll realize that that social norm is very important and violating it will cause a lot of discomfort among all the other people. The same is true with these small talk rituals. If someone offers you their hand and you don't reciprocate, it's going to be seen as an offensive thing. What's wrong? You're not acknowledging my humanity. This simple gesture allows us to connect and allows us to then proceed to a more contentful interaction. So same with simple compliments and nods. These nourish us emotionally and they help us feel less alone. And as I've said before, they transition us into more collaborative, deeper, contentful interactions. They prepare us for what comes next, but it has to be done. It's a preliminary step that can't just be skipped, because then we sort of feel empty and something has been missing and we're not reassured about our mutual regard for one another. So it prepares us to go into deeper instances of learning or working or relating to one another. And this is why we take a little time before a meeting to chat, or a little time before class, a little time afterwards to remind us of our mutual humanity and that there's more to life than class or work. These brief interactions boost our mental health. And again, this is most obvious not when they happen, although sometimes we just have a brief interaction. We go and get some coffee, we see a friend, we just exchange small talk, and we feel just a little bit more alive, a little bit more connected, a little bit less alone. And this can kind of warm our heart just briefly because someone has seen us and cared enough about us to engage in these simple rituals of familiarity and greeting. Researchers have shown that this actually reduces our sense of loneliness and social anxiety. And small talk for people who are socially anxious is a great kind of practice because the stakes are relatively low and you can go and try to practice doing greetings, asking simple questions, talking about the weather, asking people about their families or their jobs or where they come from. And the stakes are low, the encounters are brief, and you may not be great at it when you start, just like with all skills, you're not so good at it in the beginning. But even if it goes really badly, it's just a fleeting moment of awkwardness, which you'll easily tolerate and try again the next day. The beginning of a small talk interaction is about information gathering and scanning sort of the environment. So you want to learn about the other person's interests. How open are they to interaction? What kind of sense of humor do they have? What are their values? Read their social energy. Do they seem excited, bored, distracted, depressed, eager to interact, unwilling to interact, etc. And we can do this by being kind of detectives, looking at all the information that's available. The context, what do we know about this person in particular, their facial expression, the tone of voice, posture, gesture, pitch rate and volume of their voice, all these things carry information about how they're feeling, how open they are to interaction, and so on. And one of the other functions of small talk is that it allows us to find some common ground about our occupation, our family, our geographic location, our interests, our hobbies, before we pursue a deeper relationship. It's very important in professional contexts like interviews and networking and team building, where you have to be able to socialize a little bit with your colleagues. People really don't want you on their team if you're super socially awkward and you can't engage in small talk. They'll think, oh, if you can't engage in small talk, what other social skills are they lacking? And what's that going to be like to be on a team with them, or to hire them, or to be in a relationship with them, or to be friends with them? Small talk can often soften and blur the hierarchical boundaries that separate us at work or at school, where a student and teacher can have small talk before or after class. And this reminds us, oh, we're really just people, even though in some certain social context, there's a hierarchical relationship between us. You know, if you have people that report to you, or if you report to someone else, when you make small talk with them at the coffee machine or at the water cooler or before a Zoom meeting, you can get to know them more as an individual human being without such regard to the going up the hierarchy or talking down the hierarchy, the kind of stuff that is often important in the everyday of working with people in hierarchical relationships. And, you know, being good at small talk is a sign of emotional intelligence because it requires so much ability to parse and decode subtle cues, to be able to know when people are comfortable, when people are open, to be able to be at ease and make other people feel at ease. These are signs of emotional intelligence. This is the first tool we need. If you think I don't have enough friends, I don't know how to make new friends, or I'm in a new city or at a new job, small talk is the most important tool for establishing new social connections. It facilitates your integration into new groups because you have to break the ice. Small talk is all about ice breaking. And without breaking the ice, you can't move forward. That's the metaphor of an icebreaker, right? That an icebreaker is a ship that crushes the ice in front of it so other ships can follow behind. If the ice isn't broken, no one can proceed and you're stuck. And of course, classic examples. Where are you from? How do you like it here? Do you know the host, etc.? There are barriers to small talk. Some people are really anxious. They think the stakes are much higher than they are. They're afraid to engage in small talk for fear of being humiliated or embarrassed, or that it's going to be awkward if there's a silence, or it's going to be really cringe. It might be. Those things happen, but social awkwardness passes. The feeling of cringe passes. You're almost never going to be embarrassed or humiliated just by engaging in small talk. Even if there's a long silence, it passes and you go on with your day, and no one really cares that much. Unfortunately, digital habits, the phone-based childhood, the phone-based life, our obsession with these screens and social media removes us from the frequency of face-to-face social interaction, which used to be much more common when we didn't have such digital lives. And I've seen it in my students, especially after the pandemic, where people are so much living their life digitally and through social media that their actual face-to-face communication skills have suffered, and this includes small talk. And like any other skill, we need practice to be good at it. So small talk is not small. It's not small in its social importance and its functional significance and in its consequences. It's not fake either. We think because it's scripted and routinized and ritualized, it's fake. But I illustrated before with my example of communion, a ritualized thing is more important, more symbolically significant, not less. Because you open yourself up, you express interest in another person, you open yourself up to them, and that's an act of social generosity. It's not really a test of your charm. It's much more about how curious you can be and how open you can be to other people. And though the stakes are low for any given small talk, for any individual small talk interaction, the long-term consequences and returns are very high if you can get good at this, because you'll have much better relationships. You'll live in a more tightly connected social network. You'll have more friends, more relations, more associates, and so on. So I think we need a new name for this. Small talk just doesn't do service to the importance of this kind of communication. I talked to ChatGPT and asked, what's a better word for small talk? And it couldn't come up. I talked to Claude too. None of them could come up with a much better phrase than small talk. They suggested, these are the ones I selected that I thought were best: connection talk, rapport talk, social setup, bridge talk, like bridging to another form of interaction. I don't think any of these are very good. If you have better ideas, give them to me in the comments. So how can we actually do it? Here are some suggestions. First of all, talk about the environment. The environment, either the digital environment or the physical environment. If it's a real face-to-face encounter, you could always just refer to the environment. Hey, the line is brutal. How about this weather? Sure is hot, sure is cold, sure is crowded, sure is empty, sure was hard to find parking, whatever. You could just talk about the environment. You can ask questions. You ever been here before? What's it like? How's the food? And so on. Or offer a compliment. Compliments are a really kind, slightly more risky way to enter an interaction. I love your backpack. Where's it from? Just comment on one little thing about a person and say something nice about it. It shouldn't be the most personal thing about a person. It should be something relatively obvious and visible that draws your attention. Opening questions that can almost always work. What brought you here today? How do you know the host? How do you know the organizer? Any fun plans this weekend? You can't go wrong with these. There's this Ford method, which is a 4-step set of topics that you can almost always talk about. So if you want an acronym to remember, you can remember Ford. F for family. You have any siblings? You have any kids? Are you married? Etc. The occupation. What do you study, or where do you work? What do you do for a living? This is a very American small talk question. Recreation or dreams. What's your ideal vacation? What kind of hobbies do you have? What do you do for fun? What do you do outside of work? So Ford, family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. You want to keep the conversation going by asking follow-up questions, adding short self-disclosures of your own. When they reveal something, you should reveal something of roughly equal breadth and depth of intimacy. And use cues like, oh, cool. Oh, I've always wanted to try that. What was that like? Tell me more. These things are great ways to keep the conversation going. People typically like to talk about themselves, so if you invite them to, they normally will. You also need nonverbal communication in small talk, so smiling, nodding, using open body language, making eye contact, not too much like a psycho killer, but just enough, and then looking away and then returning to make sure you're paying attention. Showing warmth in every way you can with your posture, gesture, facial expression, with your tone of voice, with your eyes. Smile with your mouth, smile with your eyes, and make people feel comfortable and be warm, even when you're not talking. Back channel cues, the little grunts and things we make when we're listening, these are vital in small talk too. Wow. Oh, really? That's awesome. Lean in, raise your eyebrows. I communicate a lot with my eyebrows, as I'm sure you've seen if you watch my videos. This encourages the speaker to keep talking. When it does get awkward, you could just acknowledge it. You can say, oh, we've mastered the art of the awkward silence. Or you could just change the subject. Anyway, seen any good movies lately? Or use humor or self-deprecation. You'll get over it. A tiny awkward silence is something we've all been through. It's not the end of the world. You'll live. I think fear of the awkward silence is much worse than the awkward silence itself. So you want to end these kind of initial small talk interactions as gracefully as you can. So you close with some sort of kindness. Great to talk with you. The thing I typically rely on is, it was a pleasure to see you. It was a pleasure to talk with you. It was great to talk to you. I'll talk to you soon. I've got to go now. You step away. Or something like, I'll let you get back to what you were doing. This suggests that they want to end the interaction rather than you do. But it's really important to signal that you value the interaction as a courtesy. In the workplace, it almost always precedes and follows meetings. And this is to ease us in and out of these more formal interactions. You can always comment on the shared space and, long day, nice setup in here, all these typical things. Culturally, small talk can differ. So if you're communicating across cultures, you have to familiarize yourself about the norms of small talk in that particular culture. Mostly I'm talking about small talk in the United States. If you come from a different culture, maybe you can say in the comments what small talk is like in the culture you've got more familiarity with. There are some gender differences in small talk where women tend to be a little bit more collaborative and affirming. Men tend to tease more and engage in sort of witty banter. And if they're in a private place, it may be profane, witty banter. So knowing that there are these differences may allow you to adapt if you're in a male-female interaction or male-male or female-female interaction. But of course, these are broad generalizations and there are lots of individual differences. Some people are just virtuosos at small talk. I've met people, politicians are typically virtuosos at small talk. They're able to read the context, the energy and cues from other people and respond appropriately. They can transition very smoothly from one person to another, from one social setting to another, from informal to formal. They just always seem to be able to know the vibe and react accordingly. And they make other people feel good. They make other people feel seen and heard and understood and interesting. And if you've ever met a real, someone who's a real genius at small talk or social skill, you realize, oh, I want to talk to them again. When I was talking to them, I felt like I was the most interesting person in the world. So my final thoughts about small talk. Small talk isn't small, not in its overall significance for social relationships. It's a social bridge to friendship, to deeper professional relationships, to more interesting and meaningful, intimate, and romantic relationships. It all begins with small talk. It's the fundamental foundation for building community. We have to be able to get to know one another as strangers at first. And this is the function of small talk. And it's a skill. It can be learned. If you don't know how to do it well, it's just like, climbing into an airplane when you're learning to be a pilot. And you say, well, I'm no good at being a pilot. or picking up a guitar for the very first time. Say, I'm no good at playing guitar. Well, of course, you've never played guitar before. You've never practiced. You get someone who's better than you at it. You practice and you learn the skill. The same is true for so many communication skills. Again, if you like my style of teaching, I'm developing a new listening course, and there's a link to it in the description and in the card at the end of the video and in the pinned comment. With it, you can download a 10-page free PDF about listening skills. I really do hope you'll click on it and check it out. It's a great way of supporting the channel. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.